Welcome back and thanks for staying with the Africa News Network First, Fast, Alive. The 2018 national budget has delivered on government's promise of free higher education for students from poor and working class families. But given low revenues, the government had to make budget cuts in some areas to make this dream a reality. Now, Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba has allocated 57 billion rand for the provision of free higher education, but some sacrifices were made in other areas to free up funds. For starters, government hopes to raise 36 billion rand through new tax measures, and the government is also looking at expenditure reduction amounting to 85 billion rand.
Government will phase in fee-free higher education and training to students from poor and working class families. This means that all new first-year students with a family income below 350,000 rand per annum at universities and TVET colleges in the 2018 academic year will be funded for the full cost of study. The largest reallocations of resources towards government's priorities was on higher education and training, amounting to additional funding of 57 billion rand over the medium term. As a result, this is the fastest growing spending category, with an annual average growth of 13.7%. Accordingly, this government is proud to implement a major step forward towards our ultimate goal of guaranteeing access to higher education and training for all South Africans who qualify based on merit, not on class position. Over the next 3 years, the spending framework includes: 1, expenditure reductions approved by Cabinet amounting to 85 billion rand. 2, an allocation of 57 billion rand for fee-free higher education and training. And 3, additions to the contingency reserve amounting to 10 billion rand. Taken together and supported by a strengthened growth outlook, these interventions will stabilize public finances.
In addition, here's a look at some key budget cuts announced by Finance Minister Gigaba. 3.6 billion rand from the Education Infrastructure Grant, 7.2 billion rand from Human Settlements Development Grant, 16.5 billion rand from Procurement on Goods and Services, 27.4 billion rand transfers to provinces and municipalities. And we'll elaborate more on this and what it means, certain sacrifices that had to be made and cuts. What impact will this have on service delivery? The minister's budget getting mixed reaction, some saying that it was balanced, but of course we heard from the unions that it is not pro-poor and doesn't have a measurable plan in job creation. And we have an esteemed guest in studio who will talk us through that. So 57 billion rand for free education. Question is, where will the money come from? We joined in studio by Mr. Pule Mukwena, Black Business Council. He's from the Black Business Council. And Sunil Janes, President for the Information Technology Association of South Africa. Stefan Lauber is with the Job Summit as the Executive Director. And Mr. Isaac Lisole, founder of BuddyBox. And he represents Township Business. Good evening, gentlemen. As always, good to have you. Just a quick 30-second business. I was saying, what is BuddyBox? Really solid. That just caught my eye.
Well, BuddyBox, it's a micro distribution a platform that moves products into township businesses. That in the main we take product from main suppliers to township businesses moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll quickly ask that of the Black Business Council as well. In the bigger scheme of things in creating employment, entrepreneurship, in relation to the budget, what is your role in that?
The Black Business Council is primarily engaged in ensuring that transformation of our economy takes place on a larger scale. And how we do that is through our members. We advocate on policy-related matters to government to ensure that the majority of our people move from the periphery of the economy into the mainstream. People like Dadeli Sole here, with the kind of work that he's doing in the township, it's really to promote industries and businesses like him, not only to work in the township, but to make sure that the work that they do there can grow his business and grow the economy of the township to bring it back into the centerpiece, which is the mainstream of the economy.
So there's a lot of groundwork and movement going on, consolidated efforts to ensure that we deal with the issues of joblessness, inequality, etc. And Mr. Lauber, Job Summit Executive Director, solutions that you may have picked up in the budget to deal exactly with the inequality and the fact that there is revenue disparity in dealing with social issues.
Yeah, I would say the shift to education has in the long term a major impact in terms of job creation, because we're moving forward in the future that requires more skilled people. And generally speaking, the lack of skilled people has been a major barrier to job creation. There's been also an effort to improve infrastructure spending. And I think most importantly, there's a much greater confidence in the different social partners. I think where it was a bit confrontational the last year, we sense a greater sense of cooperation, a greater investment, confidence, all of which I think will create more jobs.
Yeah, and Mr. Guinness, President for the Information Technology Association of South Africa. What do you do?
Thanks very much. The ITA, as we know it, is one of the oldest associations in Africa. It's more than 80 years old. People would say there was no IT 80 years back. There was Morse codes. There are different pieces of IT that was there. And we represent the employers in South Africa, multinationals, SMMEs, and mid-range companies. We have more than 180 members who are part of the ITA. But essentially, it looks to creating good relationships with government, mitigating policy risk, and supporting initiatives like Stefan's initiative and some of the work that the Black Business Council is doing, and Bodybox, of course.
Okay, so you're all in the same WhatsApp group. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the budget and especially the shift of sacrifices from procurement. We know that government has been the greatest multiplier of employment through its procurement processes. We'll start with you, Relisole. How does this all translate into the transformation of the economy?
Look, I've always been saying that it is always important as a country to take control of what happens. And I've seen that from where I'm sitting, I feel that my opinion straight out would be that this is a very balanced budget. It is balanced from the fact that at least we have not allowed the world outside our country to tell us what needs to happen. We've taken control of what needs to happen. We've dictated what has to happen to our students, to our economy, to the people, South African citizens in general. So from where I'm sitting, I think the minister has done a very good job. Mm-hmm. It's a balanced budget. We just need to control it and make sure that from where we're sitting moving forward, there's a better, control measures from the bureaucrats. I mean, the people that are working in government. I think the secret is, now that we have this balanced budget, how do we make sure that it translates to the actual end user, the citizen who's sitting somewhere?
I appreciate that PR response that you've given. The question I was asking, how does this impact on those that are reliant on government business through the tender process, if there are cuts in that in the procurement?
Look, the answer is almost the same. We are saying that it is important that we agree that the fact that an individual out there who's dependent on government, now this budget, what it does is that it creates an opportunity, it opens the economy. We're saying that we need to get to a stage of self-reliance. We need to make sure that if you've had an opportunity in the beginning to start somewhere and get something from government, you need to move from where you are and move somewhere else, because the budget allows that.
Okay, Remogona, your view, especially to your members in the BBC.
Well, I think one of the most striking features that we saw in the budget was the creation of 100 billion Black Business Growth Fund.
Was that a hallelujah moment for you?
Well, we've been advocating to government to say access to finance, access to capital has always been a problem, for Black business in many areas. So I think the establishment of that fund will direct, the assistance to small business, particularly Black businesses, in order to be able to structure big deals. So if that money is ring-fenced for that purpose, I think it's a win for us.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the jobs in terms of the cut in bulk infrastructure, and we'll come and unpack those opportunities that SMMEs in the main black can advance from the 100 billion rand. But in terms of the extended public works program, if bulk infrastructure is cut, will that not impact then on not only the seaters but the whole value chain of getting internships for learners, Mr. Lauber?
I can't reflect directly on the budget, but when we looked at the State of the Nation address, Ramaphosa, our president, talked about creating 1 million internships. He appealed, and I think there's a lot of progress happening, that businesses open the doors to young people. So although I think maybe in terms of infrastructure spending may have a negative impact, there are several other initiatives in place, especially mentioned in SONA, that will compensate that loss. So I'm not worried. And I would also agree it was a very well-balanced budget.
And Mr. Genes, the over-reliance on especially multinationals, he spoke about the Evergreen contracts, etc. Do you think that there will be a more biased approach to South African companies? And as you were saying, we do have the technology, we have the expertise, that there will be greater opportunities so that we are the drivers of those particular projects?
Yes, I think the Evergreen contracts need to be looked into because it elbows out any new entrants. And the whole idea is to ensure that new black entrants get into the marketplace, that small, medium enterprises that are focusing in the various industries are part and parcel of that. Government itself has also some shoulder to bear on this matter as well, because they've allowed those Evergreen contracts to continue. Why were they not interrogated previously? Why is it a moment right now that those contracts need to be interrogated? That is a question we need to ask, and the answer to that is simple, that you want to have a deeper base, a deeper tax base, which means a greater part of the population needs to be part of this economy.
But why do we still sit with questions of not having a black bank? And I'm putting the post office aside, it's got its own challenges. And the fact that, you know, there is still a monopoly in the financial sector. Mr. Mokoena is saying that if you don't have the working capital as a small business, it's impossible for you to play, let alone the triple PFA and all of these other repressive acts that we have. Any one of you, by the way, this is a discussion, so it's not...
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I know that a lot of people always talk about a black bank, but I think there's one black bank that is owned by black people that exists, and that is the VBS Mutual Bank. Yes, it got famous for other reasons, but it is a member of the Black Business Council. It supports the initiatives of the BBC, and we support it as well. In actual fact, we have our account with the VBS. So if people could realize that we can grow this bank, it exists, and not that I'm punting it, but I'm saying it's a fact, it does exist.
Don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Ain't no shame in punting what you believe in.
But I think also the existence of a black bank has been called for by society, by black society, and I think it has to be different from the way banks are being regulated currently, because if it has to serve a certain purpose, that purpose has to be deliberate, and to be deliberate in order to achieve that objective, it then has to have a different regulatory framework. So that black bank must recognize the fact that it has to serve the needs of black people and black society and black business, as opposed to the ones that are being currently being served.
Yeah, if you say the needs of black people, unless you've walked in a black skin, which is a permanent job, by the way. You know, a lot of people say it's rough. It's hard being black because there's so many barriers to entry and why you can't do certain things historically, the fact that you don't have generational wealth, etc. That how do we change the complexion of the economy to be more inclusive? We talk about inclusive growth, and yet we know that there are a certain parameters that black people generally find it difficult to overcome. Mr. Lauber, our new black brother, I know you're black inside.
Thank you, I can see that. I would say, just when you talked about bank, what went through my head, we have a sort of 5 big banks, okay, maximum 10. And when we conducted last year the various workshops, planning sessions in terms of the job summit, it is a common pattern. Any industry you go, doesn't matter which one, you have 5 to 10 dominant players. And I think that is still very much a legacy of the past. Not only in South Africa, but worldwide, we have an extreme concentration of wealth. If I look at SONA, there's a lot of discussion about broad-based initiatives. How can we bring more young people into the economy? How can we develop SMEs? And forgive me for saying, I think a lot of these things are still very much peripheral, okay? It is not going to be change the fundamental structure of our economy where there are a few very dominant players. And I think the discussion of inclusive growth has not really started. I think last year, 2017, it was used as a political toy between different stakeholders in the political landscape. But the fundamental questions and answers, the questions haven't been asked, neither have we come up with fundamental answer. The biggest problem, I think, in the world today is the inequality that not only is in South Africa, but worldwide. And we know that in South Africa, the same thing. But I don't think there's a fundamental discussion about what can we do to change really that concentration of wealth, be it from an individual point of view or from an institutional point of view.
And that's why we have such an esteemed panel like yourselves to try and get to those answers from a technological point of view or any other innovations that...
So I suppose to that point, Cindy, look, at the moment, corporates in South Africa are doing a lot. It's just that it's happening in compartments. If you look at the IT industry, I mean, today we had a meeting. We heard today that HP, as a company, is actually embarking on entrepreneurship activities. In Tunisia, they created 1,500 jobs within a short period of time. And they're bringing a similar approach here in South Africa to ensure that skill sets are delivered to people, and that when jobs are created or skills are created, it's created for the purpose of getting into jobs or becoming entrepreneurs. And I think our fundamentals, where our fundamentals have gone wrong, we've seen the crop up of bush colleges. We've seen people being ripped off, that they've been directed to go and study things which actually have no bearing on either entrepreneurship, job creation, or becoming a professional. And that's where part of our problem is. Therefore, this 57 billion or plus minus that's being set aside for the tertiary education is critical for us. If we started this 20 years ago, we'd have a big pool of black people who are the majority and being part of the economy.
Yeah, but also there are huge challenges at basic education level. Now, cutting infrastructure budgets there when we still have mud schools and the more resourced former Model C schools are still getting the subsidies. Do you think, what kind of reforms should happen there? Because we're disadvantaging the black child, those in rural and township schools, while we're trying to empower those that are already at tertiary level.
Cindy, we are looking at a process that has taken a few weeks and months to conclude in terms of the minister giving that budget vote. One critical organ or organization here is the Parliamentary Budget Office. What they demonstrate is that the burn rate, it's called a burn rate, how you spend your money over a year. Certain departments either overspend to a point, to the quarter, and some of them are lagging behind. So essentially, if that's used, and then all the finance committees look at this, and then they say to the minister, look, this is what's happening. This department has been allocated this kind of money. They've not spent it. So the responsibility goes beyond the finance minister. It goes to the responsible department. Unfortunately, the masses and the population will suffer from the impact of that. But it talks to astuteness in terms of utilization of budget.
Yeah, and to be more efficient as well, shouldn't the education department then be allocated all its requirements in terms of abolition or running water, etc.? Because at the moment, there's all these tiers of government that, yes, you may have a school with a certain ratio to a teacher-learner ratio, and yet you don't have the basics.
The basics.
You know, like...
And this is the sadness about this very... There's a part of this budget that becomes a very sad component for me, and one is, let's take that 57 billion rand. And if you cut it into pieces, maybe into 4 or 5 pieces, you cut it into tuition, you cut it into accommodation, you cut it into meals, you cut it into transportation. All of those minor beyond tuition fees, the biggest beneficiaries in that very budget will be your big companies, your big transport providers, your big retail companies. And yet we celebrate today and we're saying that here's a breakthrough. A breakthrough for who? A breakthrough for who? Because the standards today for us to be able to provide services and ablution services to schools and all of that, today it is so difficult for black suppliers to penetrate that space. We have to do something and very, very radical to make sure that we transform the economy.
Yeah, at which level are we now in repealing those laws like the triple PFA, etc., and pushing as a collective to see a radical change?
Well, we've made our submission. We've been fighting for the repeal of the triple PFA until the revised regulations that were published in March, that started on the 1st of April. But, well, we were quite overjoyed to hear the minister saying that they're in the process of releasing the Procurement Bill, which will be coming out of Cabinet, sitting with Cabinet right now for public comment. And we made our input to that because I really believe that the procurement environment has to be overhauled in totality, because currently it doesn't serve the interests of the majority. It actually serves the interests of the minority. And what Ndatelisol is talking about here, it's typical of that.
But where do you go? Sorry to break your word. Any other industry has got an ombuds. So when it comes to small business or primarily, emerging businesses, where do you go to deal with those kind of structural challenges?
Unfortunately, there isn't that formal structure that you can go to. And we've always been saying to those micro distributors and small businesses to say that you must realize that even though the budget has got serious benefits for black people, your qualification is not only blackness. Soundness of the business is going to be the critical component. And even if we get a black bank tomorrow, the black bank will still need sound businesses. So we need to build capacity from that point of view and make sure that we can at least put forward sound businesses for us, for the economy. It's not only for ourselves, but for the economy itself.
Yeah, as it stands now, do you think the budget was more, as you're saying, in building almost in a systematic way towards a better playing field for small businesses and the country, Mr. Lauber?
I think Mr. Gigaba did an excellent job, okay? I think very few people, at least not myself, expected that he'll come away with such success in his balancing act. But we have stuff that's coming from the previous years that has narrowed his maneuvering space. And I hope with the State of the Nation address with our new president and also the questions that are being asked in terms of economic transformation and the commitment of the ANC that we are going to see more fundamental changes in future. I think this was an in-between budget.
Yeah, but it has to be measured and implemented as well. And Mr. Ganes, I want to come back to the HP, the incubation and all of those other company imperatives, because it looks good on your BEE scorecard. Don't we have enough incubation? Don't we have enough BEE partners that would enable a particular multinational to gain access to the lucrative government coffers? That in itself is problematic because we're just perpetuating the big players by planting shopping centers with the same key anchors, so to speak.
That's an interesting point you raise. I think we need to look at now the legislation that has been put in place and came in effect on the 1st of April. A long time ago, I was in government, and it was a very smart Director General, and he said to me, Sunil, if you want things to happen, legislate it. And that's what the South African government has done. They've legislated that contracts of 30 million and above should have a 30% component which goes to black enterprises. And there's also the proviso that individual entities of government can even implement that for numbers below 30 million. So that's the first thing. It's put in place. The second thing is the HPs of this world, as much as they may want to acquiesce to our BBBE Act and so on, they actually are interested in creating skill sets that support their business, because it makes no sense for a multinational to exist without having the right partner ecosystem to deliver. Because they, in business speak, we call it feet on the street. So you've got to develop it. So it's an imperative, it's a lifeline. And I guess that is why many of these multinationals do this. And myself, of course, I'm employed by a multinational, and I know some of the things that we do as SAP. The same goes for Microsoft. They've got in place now a program called Mahala, where students are given Microsoft 360 free of charge. University students are also given access to this. So they are putting back. It may not necessarily be in rands and cents immediately.
All right, we have to go to break, but I just quickly want to touch on the 30 or the set-asides and how that is going to affect, or rather benefit. You were asking who the budget really benefits.
Yeah.
In your view, very briefly, Mr. Lesole, and then we'll touch with you, Mr.
There's one important thing that the minister has done. Set-asides and there's repercussion management. He says that if you don't do this, because it's policy now, there are repercussions for those who are not doing it.
All right, Remokwena, in 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, I agree with Ndadeli Sole here, because what we need to see happening is being able for the people in government who are supposed to be ensuring that that 30 million benchmark is being adhered to, because there's no point in having legislation if that legislation cannot be policed, or if you find people in government not sticking to legislation. I mean, last year we had the BEE commissioner decrying the very government departments to say they are the first ones not to be compliant.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I'll join the WhatsApp group, by the way. Who's the administrator? Thanks indeed, gentlemen. We're going to leave it there. Pule Mokwena from the Black Business Council, Sunil Guinness, President for the Information Technology Association of South Africa, Siafan Lauber, Job Summit Executive Director, and Isaac Lesole, founder of Buddy Box, representing Business Township. You at home, thanks indeed for watching. We're back after this.